So I usually have to start waxing it from here. I try to make it out here every morning. I try to surf somewhere along the west side coast, whether it's here in Venice Beach, Santa Monica, OP, El Porto, even if I have to drive up to Sunset or Malibu, depending on where the surf's hitting. But I think it's really important to take time for yourself and take time to just listen, to process. There's so much distraction. We're staring into screens and we're absorbing all this information. And I think it's honestly driving us pretty mad. It's more important than ever to be away from that noise. It's almost meditative for me, you know. I do meditation sometimes, I'll pray, I'll do whatever I have to do to zen out, but this is the best thing for me because I got a little bit of a workout in, I get my blood going, and then I also get to think. I've always felt like I had something to say. I always felt like I had an opinion to express. I never liked being pigeonholed anywhere. Maybe that's just a result of growing up being a minority, or maybe it's a result of being a middle child, or I don't know what it is. I just always felt misunderstood, and I didn't want to be pigeonholed, stereotyped, categorized as like, this is who you are and it defines everything. And I was like, I'm very complex, I'm complicated. I believe we all are. You know, like I feel like it does us all a disservice to paint us with just, you're this label, you're this one thing, you're this one career. I actually had this one recurring nightmare my entire childhood, and it wasn't actually a nightmare because it was just a thing that would actually keep me up at night. It would keep me awake all night, and it was the idea of heaven and the idea of an afterlife, because the concept of a sprawling forever after I died was terrifying. I thought I would get so bored. And this idea of boredom always weighed on me, and the idea of monotony, and the fear of expectedness, you know, like knowing what was a predictable future, you know, was like very, 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 very worrisome to me. I built the first part of my career on being a streetwear designer and streetwear brand owner, and that's great. But again, I'm complicated and complex like anybody else, and I have other interests, and I don't really want to die with my tombstone reading, this guy built a cool streetwear brand, you know? Like, even though that's an amazing thing, that's commendable, and most people don't get to say that. It's not that I don't like the idea of being known as a streetwear designer. It's streetwear designer and, you know, and all these other things. Like, I'm not just that. I also exist in this world. I also wrote a best-selling book. I also enjoy surfing. I'm also a dad. You know, these are all parts of my identity. Maybe one day I'll be known as an artist. When I was growing up, you know, I grew up, I'm an Asian American in the 80s in America. I grew up inland from Los Angeles. I'm not even in a major city, right? At that time, America was 75+% white, Caucasian, Protestant Christian, you know, Catholic Christian. So I'm growing up in this media landscape also, where all the movies are with white people, all my favorite skateboarders, all my favorite iconoclasts and subculture heroes are white artists, white musicians, and immediately I feel different, right? I'm also gravitating and attracted towards these fringe interests, right? Like in terms of hardcore music and skateboarding and snowboarding and all these more or less rebellious subcultures, countercultures that were sprouting up in the 80s and were crystallizing in the 90s, and even streetwear was a part of that, you know? So I'd always felt like I needed to be heard because I was not cool. I was not in the mainstream by design, right? Like by my choice, I chose not to take that path, but I felt like there was so much greatness underground, that the world wasn't considering. And my heart always went to those underdogs because I've always felt like an underdog and underappreciated and unseen. And then I recognize that in others because I see how other people are struggling when they're not seen or heard or considered. And so since I'm straddling this fence between this underground and I now have access to larger platforms at this point in my career, now I'm doing it more than ever. I'm doing this interview right now wearing not my brand. I'm wearing a brand from Chicago called Half Evil that our friend Sam runs. You know, it's on the front lines of this new generation of streetwear, and it's not a mainstream brand, you know, but anywhere I go, I'm preaching the gospel of Half Evil or Bricks and Wood or Chinatown Market, which is now a massive brand, you know, probably bigger than ours at this point, but I really get off on that. You know, I love sharing this unearthed underground world with people who are kind of oblivious to it and saying, you need to learn about this and support this because this is where real culture is birthed. I think early on I wore my brand out of ego, right? I wore my brand because I was just like, what, you don't know about my brand? Oh, you don't know I own a streetwear brand? I'm a successful business guy? You've never heard of this? You know, it was more that. And then there was a period of my career where I didn't necessarily feel the most proud of everything we were making. And so I shied away from it sometimes because there were brands that I felt like were being more authentic to themselves, being more authentic to the culture, whatever you deem that. But then in the last 5-6 years, I've gotten back to this place where I'm wearing my brand again more than anything. And it's not out of ego and pride as much as I really respect the work that my team did. It's not my stuff anymore, it's our stuff. I'm so proud of the team. It's a show of support to them. I think we should all feel responsible for this entire culture that we built, for better or for worse. But we should all look at those brands and feel like we had a part in that. Even if we didn't own it, even if we never bought it, you know, or supported it, but without our voice in that conversation, perhaps it wouldn't have trickled down to XYZ brand starting or XYZ brand deciding to design a t-shirt graphic that way. But yeah, I mean, seeing beyond your own input, like your own creation or whatever you put into the equation, and realizing that you were just you're just dropping something into the ecosystem that everyone thrived off of and everyone learned from and was inspired by, you know, like that's like a whole new level of understanding about what it is that we're doing here. I take great pride in that. You know, I take great pride in it, yes, selfishly, like for my own ego, but I also take pride in it on behalf of all the other brands and designers that we started out with. You know, we went through so much and we had so much fun and we made some money, you know, but we then planted the seeds for this amazing tree, and this next generation gets to sit under it and pick the fruits and start growing their own gardens. So I don't know, it's really cool for me to see that. Now I'm like, you know, I have kids who are 10 and 7 now, 2 boys, and they're just now learning of this landscape, right? I'm so excited for them, you know, and I get to say to them, like, this is where this came from, this came from this. But yeah, that means as much to me as something that the Hundreds have done. It'll be fine once I'm in the water.